Flying Dinosaur at Universal Studios Japan is an incredible flying roller coaster. The signature attraction at the Osaka Park is not only the world's best flying coaster in my opinion, but it's also one of the best coasters of any genre, with its fantastic setting and forceful elements, including several you wouldn't expect to find in a flying coaster. So in this video, I will review Flying Dinosaur and explain what makes it so special. Universal had worked with Bolliger and Mabillard several times over the years. In 1999, they built the Incredible Hulk coaster, and now defunct Dueling Dragons for the Orlando Park, Florida's Islands of Adventure. In 2007, they built Hollywood Dream for Universal Studios Japan. And this year, they will debut the Decepticoaster, a clone of the Incredible Hulk coaster, at Universal Studios Beijing. But the best B&M in the company's portfolio is Flying Dinosaur. This coaster was announced in 2015, and it would claim several world records for the flying coaster genre. Flying Dinosaur wouldn't quite beat the height of Tatsu at Six Flags Magic Mountain, but it would have the largest drop in a flying coaster at 124 feet, or 38 meters, the fastest speed on a flying coaster at 62 miles per hour, or 100 kilometers per hour, the most inversions of any flying coaster with 5, and the longest track length of any flying coaster at 3,688 feet, or 1,124 meters. Flying Dinosaur still holds all those records today, except the length. Fly Phantasialand surpassed Flying Dinosaur with 4,055 feet, or 1,236 meters of track, when it opened in 2020. But that doesn't make Flying Dinosaur any less impressive. Flying Dinosaur is the anchor attraction at Japan's Jurassic Park area, and it is an absolute delight seeing the coaster soar overhead above the tree canopy. It gives a ton of kinetic energy to the area. Usually when a coaster does this, it's a scenic family coaster like the Pepsi Orange Streak at Nickelodeon Universe, but Flying Dinosaur is a full-fledged thrill ride, so it's exciting seeing the giant elements towering above your head. The coaster also travels over the park's central lagoon for a brief segment as well. These locations provide some of the best visuals of any coaster, and when paired with this coaster's intensity, it is clear why this ride is a home run. I originally had 2 days at Universal Studios Japan, so I thought I'd have plenty of time to ride Flying Dinosaur. Or so I thought. Just an hour before the park was to open on my first day, Osaka was hit by a massive magnitude 6.1 earthquake, and the epicenter was really close to the park. Against all odds, the park actually opened later that day, and it was actually fairly busy. But understandably, Flying Dinosaur was closed. The next day, Flying Dinosaur was still closed as it was awaiting an inspection. I was not going to leave Japan without riding this monstrous B&M flyer, so we looked into getting additional days at the park. The following day was supposed to be a full day at Hirakata Park, but we squeezed a third day into Universal. We went for a few hours at the start and end of the day, and it was enough time for me to get 7 rides in Flying Dinosaur, which is a pretty lucky accomplishment. If you know anything about Universal Studios Japan, you know this park gets absolutely mobbed, and it's not uncommon to find lines approaching 2 to 3 hours for Flying Dinosaur, especially on weekends. The ride does accept Express Pass, but in Japan, the Express Pass is absurdly expensive and good for just one ride in this coaster. The more effective way to avoid a long wait in the standby line is to use the single rider line. When Flying Dinosaur's standby line is long, the single rider line can still exceed an hour. But on the day I visited, the standby queue was a manageable 40 to 45 minutes, so the single rider line was just 10 to 20 minutes each time on average. Flying Dinosaur is a dual loading platform, but it has rather slow dispatches compared to most Universal coasters. This is due to 2 reasons. 1, the flying trains, and 2, the ride's loose article policy. B&M flyers are already slow loaders. The fact the seats need to raise and lower in between cycles really hurts the ride's overall capacity. And if you look at a lot of the flyers in the US, a good chunk of them have a dual loading platform. Sometimes it's not in use at the US parks, but Universal Japan is absolutely necessary most days. And before you even board the train, you must put everything in a cubby on the load platform for Flying Dinosaur. This cubby is locked with your train, so everything is safe. But it is a time-consuming process, Everything must go in there. Phones, wallets, keys, and glasses, even if you have a strap. And to verify everything is safely tucked away, the employees will wand you down with metal detectors before you can even sit down on the train. The employees hustle the best they can through this process, but it's just a time-consuming process because you have 32 riders per train. The trains themselves are your typical B&M Flyers. You have the comfortable and secure vest combined with the ankle guards. But these ones have an ornate dinosaur lead car that looks amazing. Flying Dinosaur is assigned seating, like many of the rides in Japan. I personally like the back row the best because you got some really odd airtime for a flying coaster back there. The front does have better visuals though, since they're completely unobstructed, but NEC is amazing on this coaster. The ride begins with a 151 foot or 46 meter tall lift hill. This is the second tallest lift hill on any flying coaster after the aforementioned Tatsu, but it leads into an impressive drop. All of the B&M Flyers in the United States have gradual curving drops. The ones on the Superman clones don't do much at all, while the ones on Manta and Tatsu have some decent force in the back of the train. However, Flying Dinosaur blows these drops away. Flying Dinosaur has a very steep drop that turns slightly to the left. So if you're towards the back of the train, you are absolutely whipped over this drop, and you even get some funky sustained floater airtime. I cannot tell you how weird it is to experience airtime in the flying position, let alone sustained airtime. You truly feel like you're flying since you don't feel the restraint pressed against your chest for those few seconds. That is followed by one of the craziest sequences on any flying coaster, let alone any coaster. It is a zero-G roll immediately followed by a fly to lie. While most zero-G rolls stop after they rotate you 360 degrees, this one rotates you another 180 degrees, so you exit this element on your back. The first 360 degrees felt like your typical zero-G roll in a flyer. The inversion occurs at the apex of the element, and it is extremely graceful. But the final 180 degree twist feels like an RMC barrel roll drop, since it occurs while you're plunging towards the ground. This rotation is more about the hang time, but it does have some serious whip as well if you're in the back of the train. But the element just keeps getting better. The positive G's start building up as you start pulling out, and then you rise up into a Raven turn that puts you back in the flying position. This Raven turn feels like a pretzel loop. The positive G's are absolutely crushing and sustained throughout the element. Few elements offer better positive G's than this, so naturally Flying Dinosaur follows it up with the one that does it better with a traditional pretzel loop. This pretzel loop may not be as colossal as the one on Tatsu, but it packs a serious punch like all the other ones. The motion is extremely disorienting, and it's paired with insane positive G's. It feels like you have the weight of the world in your chest. And the pullout takes place in a tunnel underneath the entry sign to the land, which is a really neat visual you don't get on the other pretzel loops. The pullout does have a pretty noticeable rattle though, that probably isn't helped by the high G's, but thankfully the rest of the ride is glass smooth, so this one instance doesn't really cause me any issues. The exit to the pretzel loop is notable as well. The other flyers have a high turn after the pretzel loop. Flying Dinosaur instead has a steep drop towards the ground, so if you're in the back, you get yanked towards the ground, and you receive another dose of airtime. It really catches you off guard, since it's unlike any other flyer, and you're still dazed from all the positive G's from the pretzel loop. That's followed by an airtime hump over the water that delivers a little bit of floater airtime for everyone, not just those in the back row this time. You then turn over the water and navigate this elongated inline twist. You crawl through this element, and it feels like the flying coaster equivalent of the inline twist on Banshee. It's a stark contrast to the powerful positive G's on the prior two inversions, but it works. That is followed by a forceful helix over the midway. It surprised me how intense this helix was. It feels like Flying Dinosaur is trying to break your vest restraint and throw you into the midway. That's how forceful this element is. It's a far cry from the graceful turns on Superman or Tatsu. The exit to this helix has a little dip that gives a tiny pop of airtime for riders towards the back yet again, and then you charge through a tenacious barrel roll. This was another inversion that caught me off guard. I expected it to be graceful like the final barrel rolls on the American Flyers. Those barrel rolls feel like they're trying to take you along for the ride. The one on Flying Dinosaur felt like it was trying to eject me with how quickly it inverted. It was a great finale for an epic ride. One of the biggest things I look for in a coaster is pacing, and Flying Dinosaur's pacing is impeccable. This coaster has no dead spots, and that's all the more remarkable considering flyers can sometimes struggle in that area, as they often put some tame elements on both sides of the pretzel loop. Flying Dinosaur gives riders no time to recuperate. This ride is either offering airtime, strong positive Gs, or disorienting inversions at all times. So what would I rate Flying Dinosaur? This coaster earns a perfect 10 out of 10. It is the best flying coaster I have ever ridden, and this ride is the complete package. The ride has elite elements. The first half in particular stands out with that snappy drop, 0G roll, and the positive G assault on the Raven turn and pretzel loop. The ride has no filler elements. Every element hits and adds something to the ride. And this all occurs while you're getting some unique visuals of flying over the midway or water. While I have not been on the flyers in China or fly at Phantasialand, it would require a Herculean effort to top Flying Dinosaur. This is just behind Ejinika for my favorite coaster in Japan, and this coaster placed towards the middle of my top 25 steel coaster list. It placed ahead of several RMCs, which is quite hard for a non-airtime based ride to do, but the fact Flying Dinosaur has such a unique and ambitious layout for the genre makes it stand out. So those are my thoughts on Flying Dinosaur at Universal Studios Japan, the impressive flying coaster. Have you been on this ride? How do you think it compares to the other flying coasters out there? I would love to hear what you think about this ride down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I'd appreciate if you gave this video a like and you considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.